I was 3 months pregnant when my boss replaced me with his 24-year-old niece, the one he called the future, in front of the entire department. That's when I knew I was done. I didn't cry right away. I remembered just standing there with my hands on the edge of the conference room table, nodding slowly while every part of me went still. I'd come in early that morning to prepare a Q3 pitch deck, 40 hours of work, gone in 10 seconds. Rachel will handle this quarter's client strategy presentation, Scott had announced like it was already decided. She's fresh, she's dynamic. Brings a lot of new energy. I was still standing beside the projector when she walked up and said sweetly, "Thanks, Alyssa. Mind staying to answer questions if I need help?" I was 32. I'd worked my ass off to get here. She was 24, 2 months out of some generalist MBA program, and had only been in the building a week. She wore platform heels and had that polished, LinkedIn glamour look. Rachel moved like she'd already been promoted twice. And somehow, I was the one getting pushed aside. Let me rewind. Langford Solutions wasn't some tech unicorn or Fortune 100 company. We were a mid-size consultancy with too much jargon and not enough innovation. But I liked the work. I was a lead strategist in operations, tight deadlines, big clients, real impact. For a while, I even thought I might become director one day. Then I told Scott I was pregnant. He smiled like it hurt. "Oh wow," he said. "Big news." His eyes flicked down to my stomach and back up like he was assessing risk. "Well, I'm sure we'll find a way to manage the transition." "Sure," I said. "I've already outlined a timeline. Handoffs, documentation, everything." I'd rehearsed that conversation like it was a TED Talk. But none of it mattered. Because by the end of that week, he had already started removing me, quietly. Client emails rerouted to streamline communication. Calls cancelled without notice. Files reorganized and locked under new permissions. And then came Rachel. Scott introduced her with this weird, self-satisfied grin. "My niece," he said, like it was casual. "Fresh MBA, great instincts. She's here to support some of Alyssa's workload while she preps for leave." Rachel shook my hand like I was the secretary. That afternoon, she stopped by my desk and said, "Hey, quick question about the Mercer account. Scott said you used to manage it, but I can't find your deck in the shared drive. Did you want to send it to me? Or should I just rebuild it myself?" "I'll forward it," I said tightly. She smiled. "Cool. Also, let me know if I should dumb it down at all. Scott says the CEO doesn't really do numbers." The worst part? She wasn't joking. The second worst part? She was right. Because when she presented my Mercer strategy 3 days later, Scott called it bold and visionary. No one even looked at me. Later that week, I overheard a coworker whisper near the kitchen, "Honestly, I get it. She's going to be on leave for what, 3 months? You can't pause momentum for that. She should just focus on the baby." I wanted to scream. But I didn't. Instead, I did what women are trained to do in corporate spaces. I smiled. I nodded. I sat in the back row with my decaf coffee and tried to pretend it didn't sting when Rachel was invited to a client retreat I'd pitched months ago and never got approval for. And then Scott did the thing that made me truly hate him. We were in a check-in, just him, me, and Rachel. She was supposed to be shadowing me, learning the ropes. Instead, Scott turned to her and said, right in front of me, "Honestly, just ignore most of what Alyssa's doing. She overcomplicates things. Do what feels intuitive to you." Rachel smirked. "Got it." Then he turned to me and added, "We're actually doing you a favor, Alyssa. You'll have time to rest soon. Recharge. Let go of the stress. Recharge. Let go." Like I was a burned-out laptop. The final blow came the next Monday. I got an invite titled HR Discussion, Transition Planning. That's how they put it. Transition. It wasn't a meeting. It was a performance. Scott wasn't even there. Just a wide-eyed HR rep who looked like she still bought office clothes off TikTok hauls. She offered me a seat like I was being offered a favor. "So, we've been reviewing department headcounts and upcoming changes," she said. "Unfortunately, your role is being restructured." I blinked. Restructured into what? "Well, it's been reallocated. Since you're preparing for extended leave, we've consolidated some functions under a new role we're hiring for." "You mean Rachel?" She smiled weakly. "This is part of a broader realignment. It's not personal. No severance. No transfer. No transition support. Just a printed packet of next steps and a reminder to return my laptop by Friday." I left with a cardboard box and a mild urge to destroy everything in sight. That night, Scott sent me an email. Subject: Best wishes. "Alyssa, thanks again for all your work. Wishing you and the baby the best. Let us know if you ever need a reference." I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. Then I did the only thing that made sense. I shut down my computer, sat on the edge of the bathtub, and sobbed like I hadn't let myself in months. My body hurt. My pride hurt worse. They didn't just fire me. They erased me. And I didn't say a word. Not to Rachel. Not to HR. Not even to the coworker who texted, "So sorry to hear, must be for the best." I let them think I was broken. That was the last mistake they'd get to make. I didn't go to the baby shower they threw for me 2 weeks after they fired me. The invitation said "Celebrating Alyssa" and "Baby to be," with pastel graphics and a digital RSVP link. It was organized by Rachel. The same Rachel who took my desk, my title, and, if LinkedIn is to be believed, my exact pitch deck. They scheduled it in the same conference room where I'd built Langford's expansion strategy from scratch. I didn't respond. But I did see the photos. Rachel posted them on her Instagram story, standing under a pink and gold balloon arch, holding a cupcake and grinning with a caption that read, "Just because she's gone doesn't mean we stop supporting women." Gone. Like I had died. That word stuck with me longer than it should have. The truth is, I didn't vanish. I just got very quiet. I moved into my sister's guest house temporarily. She offered it before I even asked. "No one deserves that kind of betrayal," she said, placing my bag down by the bed. "Stay as long as you need." The first week, I barely left the room. I lived in sweatpants and socks, drank too much tea, and ignored every call from coworkers still pretending they didn't know what happened. I didn't cry much, not anymore. Just floated. I watched the shadows of the ceiling fan spin and thought about how long it takes to build a career, and how quickly it can be erased by one man's ego. But the silence didn't last. Not really. It cracked the day I got a text from Clara. She was one of the few people at Langford I still respected. Soft-spoken. Always kind. "Clara, hey, just a heads up. Rachel just presented your 2022 alchemy case study at a VC breakfast. Called it her signature framework. No emojis. No exclamation marks. Just a screen grab of the event program with Rachel's name listed under keynote speaker." I didn't reply. But I saved the screenshot. I opened my old Google Drive that night and found the original version of the alchemy pitch. It was still titled Q2-2022 Restructure, Draft V3_final_final. Classic. Rachel hadn't changed a word. She hadn't even renamed the slide titles. Just lifted the deck and slapped her name on it. That's when I started keeping a folder. Not labeled revenge or anything dramatic. Just a simple, private folder on an external drive I hadn't touched in months. I named it, "Rachel Uses My Work." Inside it, I added the screenshots. Her LinkedIn update. The VC breakfast program. Comments from colleagues under her posts saying things like, "Genius approach," and "Never seen a framework like this before." You have, actually. You just don't remember who made it. But I didn't post. Didn't argue. I stayed quiet. A few days later, Clara called me. "I shouldn't be saying this," she said in a whisper, "but someone found out Rachel's getting fast-tracked for promotion. Scott's pushing it through personally." I leaned back in my chair. "She's been there what, 2 months?" "Yeah. But he told the CEO you left them in a tight spot, and she stepped up." My jaw clenched. Then Clara added, "Also, weird thing. Apparently Scott's submitted a 6-figure consulting retainer that nobody remembers approving. He's being real cagey about it." I didn't say anything. But my hand moved to my belly. There it was, a flicker. The first real one I'd felt. And it was timed almost perfectly with the sound of something shifting inside me. Not anger. Not grief. Something colder. I opened my laptop and started writing, not a plan, just a list. A list of what I knew. Of who had said what. Of what files were taken, and when. I wasn't planning anything yet. But there was something oddly therapeutic about putting it all down. Once you name the lie, it stops having power. That was the beginning. The next spike came on a Tuesday. I'd started applying for jobs again, quietly. Nothing full-time, just consulting roles I could ease into after the baby came. One of the applications asked for references. I typed Scott's name by instinct, then stared at it for a full 30 seconds before hitting backspace. I used my old mentor instead. Later that night, I got a rejection email. The recruiter was kind but direct. "We loved your background but went with a candidate with stronger internal references." Internal. Langford. I stared at the email while my baby monitor blinked softly on the dresser beside me. The room was silent except for the quiet static of the nursery cam. That was the first time I felt scared. Really scared. Not about money, I had savings. Not about work, I'd find something. I was scared because I realized what Scott was doing wasn't just about erasing me from the office. He was erasing me from the industry. And no one would stop him. Because who was I now? Just another woman who took a break and didn't bounce back. And Rachel? She was the new voice of Langford. She posted a podcast interview that week called Redefining Strategy, Fresh Voices in Corporate Operations. She said things like, "I think success is about knowing when to push past old models and make room for new thinking." I didn't even recognize my own words in her mouth anymore. That's when I knew, this wasn't just about the job. They were building a reputation off my ashes. I clicked on the podcast's website and found the contact form for the editor. I didn't submit anything. I just stared at the blinking cursor for a while. Then I opened a different tab and Googled, strategic business consultants, mid-size firms, confidential engagements. Just research. That's what I told myself. Just exploring. And then I did something small. Almost petty. Rachel posted on LinkedIn again. "Speaking to the innovation team at Kellerman Group tomorrow about agile pivots and talent resilience. Slides coming soon." I made a burner account. I left a comment. "Pretty sure that slide deck's been circulating since 2022. Attribution matters." She deleted it in 10 minutes. Didn't block me, though. Interesting. That weekend, I opened a folder on my desktop titled Langford Strategy IP. I began labeling documents. Backdating emails. Reorganizing saved Slack threads from when I trained Rachel. I exported metadata from every file I created while employed. I even found a few that had been altered after I left, her name replacing mine in the document history. I wasn't angry anymore. I just wanted to understand how they did it. Because once you know how a magic trick works, it stops being magic. I was still silent. Still invisible. But I had stopped floating. I wasn't drowning anymore. I was swimming under the surface. And no one could see me coming. It started with a forwarded email, no message, no name, just a subject line that said Langford, urgent, and a body that contained 2 screenshots. One was a calendar invite showing Rachel listed as the lead for a Q3 restructuring review with a client I knew well, Medway Systems. The second was a photo from a slide deck. Not just similar to mine, identical. Fonts, language, even the typo in the bullet under staff redundancy phasing. It was the version I marked as draft, internal only before I left, which Rachel had apparently polished and pitched as her own. Medway had been a cautious client back when I worked with them, conservative with numbers and quick to pull out if something smelled wrong. I stared at that slide for a long time and then, with no ceremony, added it to the growing folder on my desktop. That same night, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. It was short, nervous breathing at first, then a shaky voice I almost didn't place until the end. "Hey, it's Maddie, I was the summer intern? I know I shouldn't be calling, but I think I screwed up. Something Scott asked me to backdate, I didn't, and now legal's asking for the timestamp history. I'm sorry. I didn't know who else to tell." She hung up before I could call back. I sat there for a while, letting that panic soak in, because it confirmed something I hadn't dared hope: they were unraveling, not just morally, but procedurally. If Scott was manipulating timestamps and interns, that meant he was scared. And if legal was asking questions, then Janet had started looking beneath the surface. But not everything was going my way. The next day, Clara's daily message didn't come. Not in the morning, not in the afternoon. Nothing. It wasn't like her. I waited a full 36 hours before finally texting, "Everything okay over there?" She didn't reply. When she finally did, late the next night, it was 3 words. "We shouldn't talk." That was all. No punctuation. No warmth. I stared at the screen, reading it over and over again, wondering who had gotten to her. HR? Scott? Was someone watching her now, flagging communications? I felt a sting of guilt I didn't expect, like I'd dragged her too close to the fire. She had only ever tried to help. And now I couldn't protect her. That same week, I heard from Melanie again. She was the consultant with ties to the board, older, sharp-eyed, and respected enough to get in Janet's ear when others couldn't. I'd reached out weeks ago, framing it like a catch-up, just a professional reconnect. She hadn't responded until now. Her email said, "Alyssa. Just so happens Janet is requesting an external audit of strategic operations. Would you be open to a short, confidential meeting with her? She's reviewing a few people but wants sharp eyes. Let me know." I didn't smile. I didn't even sit down. I just replied, "Happy to support in any way that's useful. I'm available next week." And then I shut my laptop and walked outside into the night air, heart pounding, not because I was scared, but because I knew this was the part of the game where everyone stopped pretending they weren't playing. But right when I thought the tide was fully turning, I got blindsided. An old coworker, Lance, from legal, sent me a screenshot of an internal HR memo. He wasn't supposed to, but we'd had drinks once, and I guess he still thought of me as someone worth warning. The memo said HR had been instructed to review Ms. Marino's personnel file for discrepancies related to her departure, citing potential inconsistencies in transition documentation and professional conduct. There it was. The retaliation. The rewritten history. They were trying to retroactively dirty my file, to create a paper trail that could explain why I'd been sidelined and discarded. Something to show Janet in case she pushed back. Something they could point to and say, "See? She wasn't who you thought." It made my hands go cold. Because for all my screenshots, my files, my careful silence, if they got to the story first, they could still win. Lies have a head start. That's their favorite thing. So I made one subtle move. Not loud. Not obvious. I forwarded a single email, anonymously, to the Medway team lead. The message said, "For your awareness, the deck presented to you last month was marked internally as outdated. Attribution unclear. No name. No contact. Just enough truth to raise a question. By the end of the week, Medway's contract was under review. Scott blamed Rachel. Rachel blamed a junior associate. Janet scheduled 3 closed-door meetings. And suddenly, the people who fired me for being unfocused were the ones fumbling in the dark. Then came the moment that told me it was working, the shift from suspicion to fear. An email arrived in my inbox from someone I hadn't heard from in over a year. David. Langford's board operations advisor. I had spoken to him once at a holiday party. He had shaken my hand and said, "You're the one who built the Langford Pulse model, right?" Impressive. Now his message said, "Alyssa, I've heard your name come up again. Some of us have been less than impressed with recent leadership decisions. We've been waiting for someone like you." I read it 3 times. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I reopened my Melanie thread. Her latest update was short but loaded. Janet wants to meet Monday. But just one thing, she asked if you'd be comfortable being in the same room as Scott again. I stared at that sentence until the edges of my vision blurred. Because what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had never planned to be in the same room as Scott again. I planned to be standing at the front of it. I walked into that boardroom on a Tuesday morning with nothing in my hands except a black leather folder and a baby pink file tab peeking out the side. I didn't bring notes. I didn't bring backup. I didn't need either. Melanie led me in without a word, and I caught the faintest glance from Janet across the table, measured, assessing. She didn't smile, didn't stand, just watched me take my seat like I'd been there every day for the past year instead of erased 6 months ago. "I appreciate you coming in, Alyssa," Janet said. Her voice was steady, but underneath it, there was steel. "We're conducting an internal performance and ethics review. You're here as a third-party advisor for the strategic department." I nodded, calm on the outside, pulse thrumming behind my ribs. "I understand." What followed was a quiet dissection of everything I had ever built and everything they had twisted after I left. Janet asked about Medway first. Then the misattributed deck. Then the HR inconsistencies. I spoke clearly, outlining the version history, the handoff dates, the misused materials, all carefully timed and documented. Then I laid down the folder and slid it across the table. Inside were printouts of Slack messages, draft file timestamps, screenshots of Rachel's edits that copied my language word for word. One message in particular had a sticky note flag. It was Rachel asking if she needed to dumb it down for the CEO. Another had her telling a junior associate, "Just copy Alyssa's structure, no need to reinvent it." Janet didn't ask follow-ups. She didn't need to. She had everything. That's when Scott walked in. Late. Not dramatically, just enough. He froze for half a second when he saw me at the table, then composed himself fast, too fast. That fake smooth recovery he used when a client caught him in a lie and he tried to sell it as strategy. He looked at Janet, not me, and said, "Didn't realize we were bringing her in." Janet's voice was cool. "She's here in an advisory capacity." Scott took the seat directly across from me. Didn't meet my eyes. And that was fine. Because I didn't come for eye contact. I came for truth. "We've lost Medway," Janet began. "We've had an internal audit show multiple inconsistencies in budget forecasting and strategic documentation. Your name is on all of it." Scott leaned back, the smile never reaching his eyes. It was a transitional quarter. Rachel was new. The team's young. We're still stabilizing post-restructure. Janet didn't flinch. "Is that why you falsified HR documentation to justify Alyssa's dismissal?" He stiffened, barely. "That was handled by HR. You dictated the language," she said flatly. "You called her hostile and unfocused. That language isn't anywhere else in her record." I turned to him then, and for the first time in months, I let my voice drop into something colder than calm. "You didn't just underestimate me," I said. "You erased me. You made sure there'd be no version of the story that included what I actually did for this company." but I kept receipts. And this, I nodded toward the folder, this is the part where the record remembers. He looked at me, and for just a flicker of a second, I saw it, the moment it landed. That this wasn't just about being caught. This was about being outplayed. I think this is getting overly emotional, he said, trying to pivot. We've all moved on. This feels retaliatory. Janet stood. That's when everything shifted. You know what feels retaliatory, she said, her voice rising slightly. Replacing a pregnant employee with a woman 10 years younger and then telling HR she was checked out. Using her work, her frameworks, and her models to build an entire strategic deck, then letting your mentee take credit. Backdating complaints so she couldn't claim leave. Then giving interviews about trusting new instincts over loyalty. That's not leadership. That's liability. He opened his mouth again. She didn't let him speak. You're suspended effective immediately. We'll determine next steps with legal. You are not to contact any employee or representative of Langford unless instructed to do so by counsel. His voice cracked for the first time. Janet, let's talk one-on-one. No, she said, not looking up. We're done. And just like that, Scott Kessler, the man who told me I should be grateful for a chance to rest before my baby was born, was escorted out of the room by security. Not dramatically. Not with yelling. Just, gone. But it wasn't over. 2 days later, Rachel tried to spin her resignation as a lateral move. She posted a polished announcement on LinkedIn about embracing new creative challenges outside the corporate framework. She tagged 2 fake agencies, used buzzwords like synergy, and even included a quote from an imaginary mentor. But then someone, probably that same junior associate she condescended to, leaked a memo. It was a thread between her and Scott. Rachel, how do we fake align KPIs to show YOY growth? If Medway pushes back, I'll just say we're in discovery. Scott, just smile. Say vision. Vision always works. It got forwarded. Reposted. Screenshotted. Langford didn't even issue a statement. They just replaced her profile on the company site with a 404-page. Internally, someone renamed her wiki profile to Vision Always Works, archived. I didn't laugh. But I did forward the link to Melanie. 2 weeks later, Janet offered me a formal position, senior strategy advisor, reporting directly to her. I turned it down. Politely. I don't need to come back, I told her. I just needed to know the door was never really closed. She looked at me for a long time, then said, it never should have been. The following month, Langford introduced a new internal framework for equity-based advancement, maternity protections, and retaliation monitoring. Janet sent me the draft in a private email. It was called the Moreno Protocol. I didn't ask her to do that. But I saved the file. And printed it. And filed it behind my daughter's birth certificate. That night, after feeding her and rocking her to sleep, I stood by the window with the city lights blinking in the distance. I thought about the baby shower they never threw for me. The cupcakes Rachel passed around to celebrate my exit. The way they smiled when they replaced me. And for the first time since they pushed me out, I felt whole again. I whispered something into the soft hair above my daughter's ear. You'll never have to wonder if your mother stayed quiet when it mattered. The next morning, a message showed up in my inbox. No name. No subject. Just a sentence. I never saw it coming. But now I can't stop watching what you did. I closed the message. And then I wrote the ending myself.